describe your channel as deep diving into the intricacies of the gaming industry. And you're definitely not kidding on that one, because your essays and presentations on YouTube are pretty comprehensive. And yet, one thing I really like about it is it doesn't feel like you're being lectured or read a dump of information. It's like someone who's really passionate about it is just like, wait till I tell you about this. So it's sort of comprehensive, but really comfortable and a little bit informal. And I admire how you strike that balance. And I want to know, how do you even begin with one of your YouTube projects? How do you strike that balance? And I see that laugh right there is the laugh of, you've just opened Pandora's box.
You have no idea. I mean, it's a good question. With regards to kind of the feeling and the tone, I honestly don't know how that comes across or how it happens. It's just kind of a happenstance, because really, I am just passionate about it. I enjoy talking about it. So it is, for me, just a matter of like, check this cool thing out. I've got to tell you, this is so cool. And it's, I think that's just genuine. To some extent, I can't really fake that. And if I could, I would do it more, but it just happens. As for like the creation of the content, usually if we're doing like a critique or an analysis type video, I just start with a game that I can engage with and that I either enjoy or absolutely despise. I need to have some sort of strong feelings about it. And from there, I just play the crap out of it, take tons of notes. And there's a lot of, I think more than people probably would be comfortable with, there's a lot of talking to myself about it. Like, I'm a pacer, so I'll just like walk in circles and talk out loud. Basically what becomes the critique, I'm just verbally vomiting into the ether as I'm trying to sort out my thoughts. And I would say probably by the time I sit down to actually work out like a script or something for a game, I've done a critique 10, 15 times in my head or just out loud as I'm sorting through everything. And there's been times where like I start on a game and I'm really not happy with it. Like Days Gone was an example of this, where I started really unenthused, uninterested, and just let down. But by the end of that process of like thinking things through, getting it all out, and playing through it multiple times, I was like, actually, this is pretty good. This is actually pretty awesome. And I went from being really unenthused early on to giving it my Game of the Year pick at the end of that year. So it's a weird process. I'm not gonna lie. I think people assume it's just like, oh yes, I sit down in my recliner and I type out my script carefully. It's not really like that. It's much more, I think, psychotic or sociopathic. It's just like, is he talking to himself? Yeah, he is. And I'm lucky I've got like friends that are gamers, and my wife is a gamer, so I can bounce ideas off of them. And to some extent, it gets collaborative. And we've started doing a lot on Twitch, so I can talk with viewers about stuff and work out thoughts. But it's a little bit of a crazy process. It's a lot weirder than I think people realize.
That's one thing that, again, you do that just is such a wonderful approach to it, and you encourage it a lot in your YouTube videos as well, is that if you're going to go in deep dive into a game, chances are you'll stream it, and you want that discussion, you want that engagement as you go. Do you find that the Twitch streams and interacting with an audience as you like play through a game bring about kind of thoughts or assessments of a game that you hadn't hit you before, but like having that interaction kind of makes you go, I'd never thought of it that way.
Yeah, for sure. There's been occasions, actually, I just yesterday filmed the Resident Evil 8 critique that will be coming. And in the course of that video, at one point I discuss something that has to do with an innocuous bottle of wine that the player comes across. And I won't be specific or spoilery here in case you want to play the game or anybody watching wants to go through it or watch the critique. But to me, while we were playing on stream, I was just like, hey, that's the same bottle of wine that I saw earlier. That's a lazy reskin. And then somebody in chat was like, it wasn't. It was very intentional. And I was like, oh, okay, that's a little odd. And sure enough, by the end of the game, there's a couple big reveals, and all of a sudden, something as little as that little bottle of wine that I thought was just a quick reskin, somebody in chat helped me realize, no, that was so much more than you realized at that point. And if I had gotten to the end of the game, I probably would have forgotten about that stupid bottle of wine. But that one object in the game was so intentionally placed that it tied together with the rest of the plot. Like, it was very, very important and crucial. And I probably wouldn't have noticed it if not for somebody in chat. So there's all sorts of cool discoveries and revelations that come when we work together. It's one of the reasons I love the Twitch stuff, is because you never know what's going to happen. It's always a little exciting.
I love that was the comment that stood out and helped sort of develop that narrative for the critique, because otherwise, like, the fan feedback would have just been, here's a 4-hour video essay on why Lady Demetress can step on me, because otherwise that'll just be it. That's the that's the discourse for the most part. So I love that you have viewers who are that into it as you, that they're like, do you know what, actually just keep an eye on that. You'll thank me later.
Yeah. So we try to be a little more detailed than just sit on my face, but
it's like, yes, mother. So you said that your wife's a gamer as well. You got married last fall, I believe. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
Mass congratulations, sent back to the past.
Thank you. Yeah, she's wonderful. She's a gamer as well. She's of course not as crazy into it as I am, but she's a huge fan of the Dragon Age games, and she was playing Skyrim off my Switch and I thought she was just pulling it up and playing casually every once in a while. I looked at the gameplay counter. She's got hundreds of hours into it. I don't know when that happened. It wasn't me, but she's got hundreds of hours in. So she's really into certain games, and she plays the crap out of them. And occasionally we get her involved with Sea of Thieves or Warzone or something. But she's wonderful.
I was going to say, because my wife's very much the same. She's in her free time, because she works in crochet, making crafts and jewelry and things like that in her spare time from her actual job. So when she does play games, she just deep dives into one or two titles. And we sort of have this divide where she plays these ones, I play these ones, and we forever recommend them to each other. Are you guys in that situation? Are the two of you in that sitch where, is your wife going, you should do a video on this? And you're like, I don't have the time to play that yet.
She certainly has been trying to get me to do critiques and breakdowns of the Dragon Age games. So she's been trying to do get me there for years. One day, maybe, in preparation for the new one that they're working on, maybe I'll do that. But those are massive games, so like you said, it can be tough to jump into something of that scale. But I'm certainly the one that probably is trying to push her into playing different games more so than she is, because she rarely branches out and tries something brand new. But then, every once in a while we get lucky and there's a game that we both really enjoy and we can play together. It Takes Two. I don't know if you guys have played that, you and your missus, but It Takes Two is...
We've not yet.
I'm not joking. It's currently probably leader for game of the year for me. Fantastic. Okay. If anybody watching, it's hey, I want to play a game with my special someone or this or that, play it. Couch co-op, you only need to own one copy of the game to play it on 2 different devices. It's crazy good. I can't recommend it enough.
So when it comes to picking games that you want to talk about for your videos on YouTube, what is the siren song? What sorts of games call to you and make you go, that is worth dissecting?
I mean, to be honest, there's a few considerations that go into it, some less exciting than others. For one, you want to make sure, that, we're in a business where views are the currency. And so I do consider how, I guess, popular or clickable a game is to cover. I've done some smaller indie titles before, and I've tried to branch out into those smaller titles, but they rarely do well. They're seen by very few people. And if I'm going to spend weeks and weeks working on something, it should be on something that at least a broader number of people are going to consume, at least in my mind. So that is a consideration. It's not very exciting, but that is something that goes into it. But the main consideration is just a game that, like I said, I want to have strong feelings about it, positive or negative. There are some games where I've tried to play, like Ghost of Tsushima was one. Lots of people had very positive things to say about it. Lots of people, game of the year, lots of people loved it dearly. And for me, I tried it. I've tried it many times, and I just have never really connected with it to the point where I'm like, yeah, it's fine, but I'm kind of apathetic. I'm not in love. I don't hate it. I think what's here is good, but the little dopamine trigger, I'm just not hooked. It doesn't have me. I'm not hooked on it in a good or bad way. So for something like that, like if I were to make a video, I think the audience would smell through that real quick. They'd be like, something's just weird here. It's like he doesn't care that much. And I don't want to fake it. I don't want to pretend like I love something that I don't love. I don't want to pretend like I hate something I don't hate. And for a critique that's like, yeah, it's pretty good, but I'm just meh. It's just not that interesting or profound. So as long as I can discover or develop some sort of strong feel about the title, and it has relatively broader market appeal, or the game itself is relatively popular, or at the very least people have heard of it, then I can justify working on it. And I mean, I've worked on many critiques where it's for a smaller game or it's for a smaller release, and those videos never see the light of day. I mean, my Google Docs folder is just filled with all of these notepads of notes I've taken on games that I've played that have never gotten their own videos. And maybe one day I'll get to them, and occasionally I'll go back and break them down. Like I did a Sea of Thieves video. That was an occasion like that. I played it not expecting to make videos on it, but I took some notes, and eventually it turned into a video months later. So you never really know, but that's at least usually how the considerations begin, if that answers the question.
I mean, thank you for being honest as well about the curse of the almighty algorithm, because it does sort of affect the trajectory your work can take. But I think you strike a really nice balance, because even if it is a game, say, that doesn't grab you so much, but you sort of have that moment to talk about it, you find a way to discuss why it didn't work for you in some cases, or why it sort of didn't work at the time, and why audiences didn't fall in love with it. So there's still, there's still that level of analysis and passion for the topic present. I think you do that really well. So but it's still something that viewers should be aware of, that you do kind of have to fight for what the word of the day is a little bit. So if you can find that passion to delve into why it doesn't work for you or whatnot, then go for it. And basically, if you're watching this, Luke's figured out how to make it work. So just follow Luke's example, okay?
There you go.
When it comes to working on this, I mean, it takes a lot to go into these videos. I mean, your editing work is superb, and that is not easy. It takes a long time to hone that. Never mind just execute it on the weekly. How do you find the balance between that, other projects, other jobs, Press Start, co-producing on that, for example? How do you find the balance, Luke? Tell me.
It's difficult. And until very recently, I was working a 70-hour a week job in commercial real estate. So it was even more difficult. We're talking getting up at 6, out the door by 7, an hour commute to the office in Denver, and then I'd start work at 8, wouldn't get off till probably 6:37, hour commute back home. So long days out the door for 13 hours Monday through Friday, and then I would get home at 8:30 and start working on the YouTube stuff again. So it was just about maximizing your time, and to some extent, I'm passionate about the gaming stuff, if you can't tell. So for me, it doesn't really feel like work. And for a long time, I did it for free with no expectations. Yeah, it was a labor of love, basically. So for me, it's just something I would be doing anyways. So it doesn't feel as much like work, but more than anything, I think the key is to just remember that like Netflix and chill or like chill time, that's something that's just never really connected with me because like you're just kind of wasting time. Like especially when you can use that time for something like no joke, I really struggle with playing games with like no intention of doing anything with them. Like I really struggle with that. Just playing a game
Hmm.
for the sake of playing the game and having fun. 95% of the time, if I'm playing a game, it's because I see eventually making a video on it or working on something or tying it into this video or this discussion.
Yeah.
It's kind of a curse. Um, but I think the key is just to find something, you know, when you're passionate about something, it doesn't feel like work and you can work your ass off at it way harder than you could in any other field or with any other, you know, topic or item. And you can make a lot more stuff happen with that. I don't really know how the balance has been struck. Maybe it isn't a balance and it's going to spiral out of control. But as of right now, I'm pleased with it. So here we are.
Well, when the time comes and you've got sort of a bit more sort of space to play with it, you've said that you wanted to set up your own game studio. That's a big ambition for you. So,
Mm.
what kind of games would you want to explore first?
I've I've talked about this rarely because I'm still like sorting ideas out. And I've always thought that there's a lot of potential for theater and for games to kind of merge. And I think they're similar in a lot of ways because theater, one of the reasons live theater is so much different than film and television is that there's, I mean, of course, it's a live performance. It's much more interactive because the performer is bouncing off of the audience. And in that moment, there's something special that's created between the audience and the content. And I think that that something is also present in many video games because of that interaction that happens. So I've always been interested at the idea of melding and merging like musical theater with video games and telling a compelling narrative by way of a video game, but that also ties in musical elements that can help convey emotion a little more efficiently than just dialogue might. Um, Plus, I just love musicals, which is part of it. So I think that there's potential there, and I'd like to try something like that eventually. There's been discussions. I know they announced probably a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, that they were going to try and make a musical video game. They got some big name talent on it, like Troy Baker and others. So we'll see if that ever develops into anything, but I'd be interested to see where that goes. I haven't seen that really tapped yet. There's been some games that have musical elements briefly, but nothing really fleshed out. So that's at least where my mind goes. Like it's something that hasn't been tried yet that I'd like to try.
So that'd be absolutely incredible. Because again, like you say, it's about in a theatre, it's that connection of being there as the performance is happening, and you sort of have a different version of that when the game is an immersive experience, when it's very sort of, you know, I mean, first person, like in some instances. Would VR play a part in sort of a melding of the two, for example?
It could. VR is great for increasing immersion. I think there's still a lot of difficulties with it just because in many instances VR games have to be developed in a totally separate and different way than non-VR games or
Yeah.
games for more broad audiences. Sometimes you can meld the two together, like Resident Evil 7 famously did this with the PSVR
Yeah.
where you could just play it with that headset and that worked pretty well. Um, so I think something like that could work, and I'd be interested to check it out. And I have heard rumblings. I think we're going to see some interesting developments into VR in the next couple years. You know, with the sequel to PlayStation VR coming, hopefully relatively soon, probably in the next year or so. We'll get a new headset or something. So we'll see kind of how that develops and how seriously the big companies want to take it. But until then, you know, we'll just kind of wait and watch. but it could certainly have something to do with it.
Let's experiment. We'll ask around for budget, and we'll create a game called Community Theatre Production of Greece VR, and you just put the headset on, and you're just Kaneki. So if you don't hit the notes and you don't get the dance right, no trophies.
Yeah.
Not sure that's the perfect melding of theatre and VR, but
We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
The outline's there.
Have your people call my people if you think that idea's got legs, and we'll. So with sort of video gaming as a hobby, kind of melding into video gaming as a lifestyle and as a career, I hesitate to ask what game you're sort of obsessed with at the moment, in case the answer is, this game's taken over my life. It's in every Google Doc. It's in my editor right now. I don't want to talk about it. But is there a game at the moment that is sort of making you go, "Ooh, this, well done. You've pulled the hobby back out of me a little bit for this one"?
Yeah, that's a good question, because with the type of stuff I do, of course I have to play every major release, and I play them in relatively quickly after launch, and I just have to keep moving down the list and keep plowing through them. So it's really hard for me to find like one game that I can just be obsessed with in that moment and just enjoy for the sake of enjoying it. But I'd say right now, I mean, just last night I wrapped up the main story of Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, and that thing is fantastic. It's phenomenal. It strikes like feelings of childlike wonder and whimsy. Like it feels like a game that I would have really enjoyed when I was like 8, and that's awesome. But then it's also just a great game by itself, and so it just works on many levels. And then there's a whole, I mean, speaking of musicals, there's a whole musical number at the end after all the credits roll. So if anybody's playing it, let the credits roll, and then Emperor Nefarious sings like a whole ditty about being alone at the top, and it's wonderful. So that's one that I really have had a lot of fun with recently. I think the game that's consumed much more of my life than I would prefer is probably Assassin's Creed Valhalla. And that's because a lot of my audience is very I mean, we're big fans of Assassin's Creed. I mean, even like behind me right there, I don't know if you can see that, is a statue of Ivor. So like, I'm a fan of Assassin's Creed. I have been for a long time. And it's so a lot of people have expected me and been waiting for my critique on Valhalla, and it is coming, I promise, guys. It just takes a long time because the game is freaking gigantic.
It's so long.
It's so long. They were like,
much. There's simultaneously way too much to do and not enough things to do. It's just big. It's
I would say a classic example of bloat. Ubisoft bloat specifically. And
Ublotsoft.
Yeah, Ublotsoft. And I like that. I'm going to steal that. That's good.
You can have it.
But it's an example of, like, Red Dead Redemption 2 was a great example of a game. It's very drawn out, very long, lots of empty space between things that you're doing. And it works phenomenally well because the developers were confident enough that they were like, yeah, it's okay if it takes you 5 minutes to ride your horse to the next town over. That's okay. Enjoy the scenery, chill out. Like, it's as simple as that. But in Valhalla, they feel the need to like scatter 15 collectibles along the way and then have a bunch of like wolves attack you halfway there. And they're like so insecure with the world design that they don't want to just chill and let it be. That's all they needed to do, but they couldn't. So yeah, I mean, you'll hear all about that in the full video, but I'll leave it there for now.